Well, hey, and welcome to Leadership Pathway, first Thursday webinar. I'll be the host, Dave Miller, and today we're talking about spiritual formation and how to ensure that this is going on with young leaders that we have under our care, primarily in residency. It's going to be a great conversation. Let me bring in our guest, Tony Simoncini from Skyline Wesleyan. Tony, introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, good to be here with you, Dave. My name's Tony Simoncini, and I am a pastor at Skyline. I've been here about 4 years. I am married for 25 years. I have five kids, all in Gen Z, so from
Oh,
23 down to 17.
so you're an expert.
So yeah, so I'm not only passionate about it in my work, but also in my home. And I'm currently overseeing several things at Skyline, but one of the things that I oversee is our residency. We have about 10 residents currently at Skyline.
Talk a little bit about the history of how you got to 10 residents at Skyline. Is this something that you inherited? Is it something that you started? How did you get to this point?
Yeah, so we actually launched a campaign where we were talking about having, more campuses. We're already multi-site, but really feeling like God was calling us to do more here in San Diego. So we want to launch a bunch of campuses, and I just kind of had this question for the team when I first got here was like, well, how are we going to staff these campuses? And so I recommended that we started a serious leadership development program like a residency, and kind of gave them a pitch of what that would look like. They said, okay, let's do it. Got a very small budget to start it. And this was in like April or maybe March of that 2022.
Yeah.
And I started calling everybody I could, talking to people I knew, got in touch with Leadership Pathway, began to talk to you guys a little bit, dream about what it could look like, and literally, started the residency really with the people that we already had in our church and some people
Right.
that I was already discipling and mentoring
Yeah.
about 3 months later. So it was kind of from the dream to the approval to starting it. It took us about 3 or 4 months, and really just been figuring it out ever since.
Yeah. Thing I like about Skyline, I mean, how churches 5 or 6 thousand or something. Is that right?
Yeah. hmm
Big old legacy church with a rich history going way back, right? I think a lot of us have heard of what's his name that wrote all those books and used to be there a long, long time ago. But what I love, Tony, is a lot of times the larger the church, the longer they think about it, the more they engineer it, the more they talk and design and I'm always on the other side. I'm more like, let's start Thursday. We just got to get going on this thing. And I
Yep.
love that that was kind of the path that you took. It was like from idea to people on the ground. It was a few months.
Yeah, and I think, we tend to do things slow sometimes as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But I do think that when we see a good idea, we're willing to take a risk. And
Yeah.
even though I was kind of new to the team, I think the general idea of like we have to have a clear pathway of development
Right.
for next generation of leaders was like an obvious yes, and
Yeah.
it really felt like a win. So I think they were like, once they approved it, they were like, yeah, do whatever you want at that point. And so yeah, I wanted to start. I knew that from a timing perspective, I wanted to start it as close to kind of the beginning of the fall as I could.
Yep. Yep.
But it took us a few months just to kind of to get our bearings. And I just really felt strongly God said start with who you got. And so
Yeah.
we did go visit a few, colleges and things like that. But really just started with I went and asked because I was fairly new to the church.
Hmm.
So I just went to some of our youth pastors and some of our other leaders and said, hey, like who's a great young leader who's not in ministry right now, or
Right
do we
on.
have anybody here? And so
Love it.
went and grabbed two or three guys that were doing other things, but kind of super volunteers, but I think really had a clear call to ministry. And so once we got to know them and
Yeah.
affirmed that call, it was like I invited them into the residency, and a couple of them had to quit, kind of like good paying jobs that may have produced something in their life, but
Yeah.
really, I think the opportunity to pursue full-time ministry was something they really felt called to, and so that's what they did. And And we like, yeah, like I said, we've been learning ever since we started it. We certainly, didn't know what we were doing when we started it, and literally just felt called to it. And so we've been doing it 3.5 years now, and I feel like we're getting better every year. I don't think we still landed the plane on exactly how to do it, but we're just working on getting better every year.
I mean, I know you've got a few of these that you're raising at home and at schools and things, but what's been your biggest learning that as you went into it, you had one idea and it's spun you around a bit, and now you're in year three and you've changed your thinking on when it comes to Gen Z and this residency thing and stuff. What's been a flip moment for you? You know?
I think there's been a couple. I think as it relates to just the function of what a residency is,
Yeah.
it's you can take for granted. As we're having this conversation on spiritual formation, right?
Hmm.
You can just take for granted that spiritual formation like has been happening in a real way, and assume that it is happening, and
Yeah.
assume that we're doing a good job all the time as a church. And I
Yeah.
I think as we kind of dug into the residency and dug into like what do we teach? How do we form them as leaders? One of the key factors for me was like, okay, we have to spend a significant amount of time in kind of all aspects of the spiritual formation conversation and help them see that like they're being formed when they're staying up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because that's just what our generation does or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
And just try and help them get to a place of um, maybe like adulting a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
because most 21, 23 year olds, man, they're still just having fun and still just, and it really wasn't my generation, I don't think, and it certainly
Right.
wasn't me personally, just trying to have fun as long as I could. But honestly, like I said, and I've got five of them, and sometimes, and I want them to have fun. I don't want to be the buzzkill, but at the same time, I want them to also be thinking seriously about career. So then when career is ministry, the realization of like, oh, I kind of have to play catch up as it relates to spiritual formation
Yeah.
because yeah, I did some devotionals and I did some basic things in high school or college, but I don't know that I've actually created a bunch of spiritual disciplines
Yep.
that are forming my life in a way that's really profound.
Let's talk about look, give me a working definition. When you say spiritual formation, do you mean join a group? Is it a rooted group that launches in September and is done in April? What do you mean when you say spiritual formation at Skyline Wesleyan with your residency? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'll just rip off other people's definitions because that's why I reinvent the wheel.
Yep.
Um, so I'm a big Dallas Willard fan, and so I'll use some of his stuff. And of course, everybody current that's writing from Comer and other people, they're
Hmm.
just ripping him off too. But um, Willard says that spiritual formation in the Christian tradition is the process of increasingly becoming possessed and permeated by the character of Jesus as we walk in the easy yoke of discipleship. And Comer kind of simplifies it and says spiritual formation happens by what we give our attention to because we all become like what we behold. And so I think if you put those together, it's like simply spiritual formation is how we help people look, love, and live like Jesus. Um, and I think that we do a really good job of helping people like know about Jesus. And I think how do we help people look, love, and live like him?
Do you do you draw a distinction between the term discipleship and spiritual formation? Are they synonyms in your mind, or are we talking about something different when we talk about this?
I think in my mind, they're definitely synonymous.
Okay.
I think in my mind, you know, tr I get it. Like big church, we have to have kind of a discipleship book or a curriculum that helps people. But I think the end goal of that quote unquote men's discipleship group or whatever should be hopefully helping people to look, love, and live more like Jesus. So we're becoming more and more like this Jesus that we proclaim as Messiah and our Lord. And so I think that's the end goal of any quote unquote discipleship, program, or it should be.
It seems to me, it seems to me if you asked most of us who's discipling you, or if you lined up a bunch of leaders and you said, when was the last time you were being discipled, right? I
Hmm.
I think we'd probably be disappointed with the answers. Tell me about your own story. When did this happen for you? How is it happening, or when did it happen?
Yeah, I think for me, like I didn't grow up in the church, and I was a young 20 something in college, doing my thing. And in between my sophomore and junior year, is when I became a Christian. As I was kind of leading up into my sophomore year, made some friends with some folks that were believers and really just intrigued by their relationship with the Lord and began to explore what their lives, why their lives looked like the way it did. And so when I became a Christian, I had a pretty radical kind of change of life and encounter with God. So I changed my life, really began to seek what God had for me. So I was kind of all in, right, in my junior year of college. And as that was happening, I had our youth pastor came alongside and really just began to say, "Hey, like I really feel like God's got a call on your life, and I want to help kind of form that. And so I want to meet with you weekly, and we're gonna read through the Bible together, and we're gonna talk about spiritual things and what God's doing in your heart, your life." And I said, "Okay." Like I was open to that. I only thing I didn't even own a Bible, when I first became a Christian, and so that's kind of what we did. And so we started there, but shortly after that, probably 3 or 4 months into that kind of spiritual forming relationship, now it was like, hey, I want you to start kind of leading in youth group and giving kind of tasks of leadership and things, and then similar to discipleship, right? And Jesus, the disciples come back and be like, well, that didn't work, or help me with this. And so part of the discipleship process and the formation was also just kind of in my leadership. And so, for 2 years or more, probably about three, I was, helping lead in our youth group, assistant youth director or whatever title they gave me at some point. And what I was basically doing was kind of learning on the job while simultaneously being discipled in the ways of Jesus and being formed in terms of spiritual disciplines and um, reading and journaling and what my prayer life looked like. And just again, just really every single, we didn't meet every week after probably 6 months, but we met a lot. And again, because some of it was ministry related, but we met a lot, and it was discipleship, but for sure it was a probably a non-intentional or an intentional but not programmed spiritual formation process that I was going through.
Do you do Well, let me ask how do you do this with residents? Is it a set plan? They start in August or July or whenever they start. And I also know, like most people leading residencies at their church, you've got at least three hats that you wear there for the organization. I know you're managing full-time people. I know you're overseeing all sorts of crazy things and preaching occasionally and all the things, right? So it's not like this is your full-time one area of focus. Although if you said don't answer the question what you wish your job was, because you might get out of the other things, but is it a set plan? How do you know? What do you do, and how do you know if it's working? Maybe that's the question. What do you do with a resident? How do you know if it's working or not? How do you know if it's taking in their heart and in their life?
Yeah, so I think, again, we've been learning over the last 3 years of this process. And again, I think while I started with, surely we'll talk about some of these things, it became really clear, like, not only did I want to do it, with them or for them, I think they really, really, really wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, we've come up with kind of a spiritual formation plan that we do. And really the goal is to get them to a place of having kind of an intentional, spiritual, disciplined life. And so we have the basics of the spiritual disciplines for spiritual formation of, reading, writing, journaling, praying, those basic things. But then we also challenge the residents to spend time doing some of the disciplines that maybe don't come as easy.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the challenge. Here's the things that you're currently doing, and we have them write it out. But then we also challenge them, okay, now I want you to pick two that you don't like doing, that you don't come natural. You're in ministry, so reading your Bible should kind of be a thing. So, while that certainly is a basic part of the spiritual formation process, I want you to pick some things a little bit harder. And so we ask them to kind of pick those things. And then how we're doing it is we're constantly in community, processing it, writing about it, talking about it, and then even like adjusting schedules and things like that. I have them write out like a calendar of what their life looks like. And so where are you being kind of discipled or having some of these spiritual formation conversations? And then even allow them to adjust it as they kind of figure out what is working and what isn't. So it's a constant conversation between me, between them, and between their coach because they're being coached in the residency as well. And so um, the question of do I see how it's working? Obviously, right, as becoming more like Jesus isn't something that you necessarily can tangibly go, oh, you're more like him this month than you were last month. But I think the way it's working, one of the markers I think we use is, okay, you've been in this residency 6 months, 7 months, or whatever. The goal then is for them to kind of start working it out with, someone or people in their ministry influence.
Hmm.
And so the goal then is if a worship leader's, doing spiritual formation, there should be someone in their kind of downline, if you will, or somebody that they're pouring into, that they would then be kind of walking through some of these things. So I think how we know it's working is when they can start talking about it to other people and helping other people walk in it. Working to me isn't a destination, right?
Yeah, right on.
Working is I'm seeing this work in my life and now I want to share it with you. So the goal then is to get them to start working it out and walking it out with other people in their kind of life or ministry influence.
Tony, I think I was discipled in college, and then I was discipled at my first ministry by a guy I still text with every once in a while from age 22 to 25. I think we spent 2 years in Romans, as I recall. Wednesday morning, 5:30, pancakes, about seven guys. Andy Fry, he's a football coach at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. I think that was the last time I was discipled, 25. And then from there, just continued to get more busy
Hmm.
doing the work of ministry. Do you think there's something more intentional with your residents than with the normal staff community of Skyline or at a normal church, do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like what we're doing is a lot more intentional, a lot more like programmatic for the spiritual formation. And the goal is to help them understand, like, because for me, residency, working at the church, right? And the whole point of spiritual formation isn't because we want to make you a better church person who works at the church.
Right, right.
It's, hey, this is about making you a better husband, wife, mother, father, follower of Jesus,
Yep,
church person,
yep.
staff member, a better neighbor.
Hmm.
So as we talk through those things, I think what the cool part of what I'm getting to see is yes, I think for sure we spend more time on it um, in the residency, but now like my youth pastor who was one of our residents 3 years ago is now doing spiritual formation with his resident, right? And so we're definitely seeing it kind of it exist within the organization,
Hmm.
and on all levels. So I do think that the residency is even helping kind of push out kind of more of the discipleship, spiritual formation parts. And man, we're just like every other church. There's a lot to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's never enough time to do it all.
Right.
And so for sure, like that's, actually just had a meeting with our coaches, and that was one of the things we talked about was how do we then get our coaches to make sure that spiritual formation is at the forefront of a one-on-one
Yeah.
rather than um, maybe you get to it, right? So how do you start there rather
Yep.
than get to it if you can?
Um, what do you do? What have you done? I don't know if you've had this situation yet where someone's excelling in work at Skyline. They're that classic go-getter type A, Enneagram 3, Enneagram 8, the people that just they want to please you. They got daddy issues, all the stuff, all the classic type A people in the works in their 20s. They still exist. They still exist out there.
Hmm.
And I bet you have a few. What do you what do you what do you look for and what do you do when when the work skill and the achieving stuff is growing more important in this person's life than the pursuit of something that's real in their relationship with Jesus? What have you done? What have you found that works in that situation?
Man, it's hard because, and again, for me, I have a certain purview.
Yeah.
And so from a residency standpoint, I think I'm able to speak into it in ways that maybe other people can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we just continue to have those conversations. We continue to have the conversation around, how's your soul? How are you
Yeah.
doing? What's going
Right.
on? What is God teaching you? And it's that kind of constant thing. I think for us here at Skyline, we try and do a good job, and there is certainly an assumption that you're doing it, but hey, we meet in small groups, we have
Mm-hmm.
conversations around what God's doing, we're praying for one another
Mm-hmm.
on a daily basis. So there definitely is, it isn't just a work only, it's how we try and start our day.
Yeah.
Um, and the truth is you probably only discover those, hey, your spiritual life isn't matching your professional life. You typically, especially with your people that are outside of kind of the residency,
Mm-hmm.
you're often finding that when you're having to sit down and having the hard conversation,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and then again, you work through it with that person and try and help them see that, maybe they have lost their way a little bit, and let's get focused on the spiritual side of things just as much as the crushing it at work.
Yeah. We talk about failing forward. That's one of the soft skills, right? The first 3 months, try to help a resident experience something that's a safe. It doesn't take them out, doesn't cause them to quit, but they understand that you can fail and continue to move forward. It
Hmm.
strikes me that that kind of the cracks in the spiritual foundations show themselves during conflict when things aren't going well, right?
Hmm.
It's pretty easy to appear to be something you're not during the worship set
Yep.
or during the moments, the mountaintop moments.
Yep.
What kind of trends have you seen, in particular with just young 20 somethings, Gen Z, who who come into the residency thinking that this is going to be camp? It's going to be this spiritual experience. They've had summer jobs. They might have even had full-time jobs post college, right? And they would and they're of the mindset that, man, if I ever had an opportunity to work at a church, that would be amazing. How do you let them down easy? What have you experienced in that way? That this is a job. There's this dichotomy. Somehow your spiritual life and then your work life, we bring them together. And I would think, Tony, knowing you a little bit, if you managed Home Depot, you would want these things to come together for a
Yeah,
believer. It's
for
not
sure.
like Skyline is this setup. It is different, but it's not in your worldview. I know the way you view people. Um, how have you addressed that with the person that thinks they're coming to something extra spiritual and extra Jesus-y, and then they show up and it's work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we try and set the bar even in our interview process, right? So I think what we try and do is we try and make sure that people understand like it is what it is, and so we don't really candy coat it. So by the time they kind of start the residency, I think at least I feel like we've done a pretty good job that they're aware of kind of the challenge. But again, it's even how we started off and how we start everything off in the first week or so of residency where we spend a little bit more time with them is really just to help them understand like it's actually quite difficult sometimes for your kind of spiritual life, your work life, and your community, right? To kind of all be connected into one. And so we do our best to kind of set it up as this is what you're actually walking into. And so I think for the most part, we haven't really had like oh, I didn't realize this is what I was walking into, you know? I think the other part of that is again, for the most part, we've continued really to develop from within, even within our residency. And we've had two or three that have come outside of San Diego or Skyline, but the vast majority have really come up through our ministries. So I think there's also again another level of trust and upfront conversations we can have. So I don't think we've actually faced it to where it's been like um, some fallout,
Hmm.
of complete lack of expectation.
What are your expectations? If I was your resident and you sat me down and you wanted to have one of these conversations, and I'm 8 months in at this point, what am I showing you? You- What are you making me prove to you that I'm growing? How do you do this?
So I mean, we do a lot of reading and we do a lot of writing.
Okay.
And then we do a lot of like processing,
Hmm.
in a group. So as we're kind of approaching our whatever this is, 6 month or so,
Hmm.
I've certainly been sitting with the resident and basically asking them why they're not talking in the meetings. Why are you not sharing in the meetings? Or, hey, here's this great stuff you've written, but why are you not actually talking about it?
I
Why?
would say, well, Tony, it's my personality. I'm introverted. You
Yeah,
would say,
we crush all of that though, as we've already talked through all that. We've pretty much already established that that's not a thing, right?
yeah,
And so at that point, it wouldn't be an excuse because we cover all of that. So it's really a matter of holding them accountable to all of the things that they say they want to be,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And understanding that like you want to be a church leader, you want to be on staff at this church. There's things as far as ministry that you want. And our goal in the residency is to get you there within a year and a half to 2 years.
hmm,
And whether we hire you or somebody else does, they're fighting over hiring you, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so what kind of residency would we have if I wasn't literally pushing you to your very limits as it relates to, yeah, like I don't love sharing all these things. It doesn't matter.
hmm,
You're going to have to. And again, like we have enough people keeping kind of a pulse on some of those things, but I do have to even remind our coaches all the time, you know, are you having these conversations around how they're being formed spiritually and not just focusing on the hard skills and
it's good.
and even the soft skills, right?
Yeah, right. That's right.
Because those are important, but those really can't come at the expense
That's
of how
right.
they're being formed spiritually.
I mean, from our chair, we don't speak into this a lot. Like, who are we to try to tell a pastor a country away how to be? We say things like we're assuming it's happening. We're assuming education. We're assuming spiritual formation because we know you guys have. But I don't mean when I say that, I've never meant that I know it's happening. I just mean we're gonna ask questions and assess and make that leader, make that supervisor coach person give us the answer of how is your resident, how are they growing in Jesus? How are they
Mhm.
becoming more Christ-like? Let me give you a scenario. Okay. Uh, you're at a church of 5,000 with 10 residents, and I'm sure the community, that's good and bad. Like every scenario is positive and negative, right?
Mhm.
But let's say I'm at a church of 500 and we're all a bunch of 40 and 50-year olds, and we our staff prayer time down at the Baptist church, we know what it's like. Staff prayer time, forced staff prayer time at
9 a.m.
you know what I mean? Like a
Yeah.
22-year-old in that environment. I've got my resume. How what do I do first? What do I do first? They don't have three other peers on the residency team. It's me. It's me and this person. And then they're on a staff team of six or seven. But we don't have this culture. We do groups, by the way. They
Hmm.
launch in August and they're done in May and they take the summers off and they meet supposedly every other week. But are they being discipled, Tony? Are the adults being discipled? Would be a question mark.
Yeah, I think if that was
What do I
me,
do?
I think if that was me, I'd be even that much more excited because then I personally would
Oh,
have that
yes.
much more time and energy to disciple this one resident.
Yeah.
And to your point, like again, I know that no matter how big you are, small you are,
Yeah.
I've done small
Right.
church and
Right.
led one, and
Yeah, I
so I
know.
get it.
Yep.
There's always a lot to do. But again, even when I was leading a small church in Utah,
Mm-hmm.
I personally was discipling this person and these five, six, seven, eight, 12 at once, six at once.
Mm-hmm.
And then certainly as it related to staff people, okay, now I need someone else to come in and do our youth. This
Mm-hmm.
is the person I've been discipling for the last 3 years,
Yeah.
and it's been happy. So for me, I think it would be an exciting time because I personally would be able
I
to
love
spend
it.
that much more time intentionally discipling this person. And discipleship is not, in my mind, and spiritual formation is not just simply going, hey, we read through Romans together.
Right.
Isn't that awesome? Right? It's a much bigger picture
Yeah.
of, and you mentioned it, not letting people use excuses like, well, I'm introverted, so, right?
Right.
The way I coin it is we give ourselves all kinds of excuses to suck at something.
Yeah.
And at some point, it's like that's not an excuse, right? And so
Right.
we get a resident that starts and they say, oh, I'm introverted, so I don't like talk. It's like, no, that doesn't work,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So what you got to find is what's the reason why you don't want to get up there and say those things? What
Yeah.
lie are you believing that
Yeah.
says people think you're stupid, people think you're
Yeah.
going to sound dumb, whatever the thing is, push them, push them, push them, ask them questions. This is Jesus's process of discipleship, right? Asking questions so that there's a sense of self-reflection and self-awareness. It's the way I personally do it.
Yeah.
And so it's how we do it in our residency. But if I had one, I'd still do it the same way.
I
And
love
again, I
it.
think I did that
Yeah.
as a small church pastor in Utah. And
I
those
love the
people
fact
are,
you wouldn't use that as an excuse. That's even better. You mean I only have to disciple one? There's no getting away. They're going to have all the attention.
yeah, I mean, you might need to pray for them more than pray for me.
That's good. I know you do a lot of coaching, and I know coaching and discipling, they bleed, right? They do bleed into each other a little bit. How are they distinct from each, or do you draw distinctions in those moments when you're having a coaching relationship or you're discipling? What's the difference in your mind, or is there?
In my mind, they're not really different.
Yeah.
Obviously, again, as it relates to um, the 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 specific situation or whatever. But like uh, coaching within the church, coaching outside of the church, I was a baseball
Mm-hmm.
coach,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and as much as I wanted to make somebody a better baseball player, my goal, none of those kids were going to make it in the MLB, right? So my goal
Right.
was to make them better brothers and
Yeah.
better sons and
Right.
better community members and all those things. And so, sure, we talked baseball. Here's the hard skill of hitting a ball. But we talked about like, why did you freak out and get so angry when this happened? You know
Mm-hmm.
what? So in my mind, the coaching of the hard skill or the soft skill or whatever isn't disconnected from the spiritual formation. And I would say, if you have a really good coaching relationship with someone, there's nobody better to speak into the life of their spiritual formation because you have so much relational equity. You've you've spoken things, you've helped them become better at the thing that they're passionate about. So in my mind, you actually have more of a platform or a right to speak into that person's life as it relates to their spiritual formation.
What's your hope? When you think of each of those residents, I mean, you mentioned highly desired and hireable, right? That's our cliche. You want them, obviously, if they're going to spend 2 years with you want them to move on to in their vocation of ministry. What's your hope beyond that for them?
that they don't become a statistic.
Oh,
The statistic is, I don't know the number, but it's like
yeah.
85% of pastors don't make it past 5 years
Right,
or whatever, right?
right, right.
So to me, that's why we do spiritual formation as a big part of our residency is, I think it's really clear that ministry in of itself is hard and
Hmm.
it brings the pressure, and you mentioned, right? Like that pressure is what kind of reveals the cracks. And so I think the sooner we can get to those cracks and identify them, and
Yeah,
maybe even not have to identify the cracks through a really hard thing in church, why
yeah,
not identify it before they ever get there?
yeah,
And if we can do that, and if we can help them, I think that's the chance of them not becoming a statistic. I think if we're not doing that for them and helping them become spiritually formed, then I think, there's a good chance that they could become a statistic and not make it past 5 years. And I tell them that
yeah,
the reason why we're doing this is because I want all of you for this to be the rest of your life and whatever God's called you to, right? And I don't want you guys out in 5 years. I want you to make it. And
yeah,
so I'm really open and honest about why we're doing what we're doing and why we're digging into some of the daddy issues and some of the past
yeah.
things that have really have been harmful for you and your relationships, right? Or whatever that the situation is. And then that's why we're gonna, you know, how we go about it is we go about it with spiritual disciplines that form you more into the image of Jesus, and rather than identify with the things that have happened to you or the things that have been hard in your life.
There's never been an excuse. I'm not saying that. Even back when I started, there's no excuse to not be discipling, to not be spiritually forming the people on your team. But in today's world, the content is everywhere. The help is everywhere. Even Chat GPT, even AI can help speaks into your direct uh, situation.
Yeah.
So if somebody's out there, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't even thought of this. Well, I'm not doing this." How can we find you? How can they find you? Tony at Skyline, T Simoncini.
There you go. T. Simoncini at skylinechurch.org.
All right, we're gonna drop that in the show notes. Tony, thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So this is ingredient number 6 out of 7. They're in no special order. They all need to be a part of your residence life and your plan as you form and you shape them for the future. And you can find the rest of them on YouTube. It's chapter 3 of our book. It's sitting right over there. I should have had one within reach here. I could have held it up and shown you who's the next you. Would encourage you to pick it up. I would encourage you to reach out to Tony, pick his brain. He's a good guy. He'll answer your email eventually. I have learned that.
I get around to it eventually.
You'll get down to. Okay. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks.